Okay, hello and welcome again to my home here in New Zealand. This is webinar number 16 and just want to make sure everything's working. Okay, looks like we're up and running. Hello, sorry about that. So welcome again. This is webinar number 16 of a series of webinars I've been doing to help you prepare for your IELTS test during the lockdown period. Actually, in New Zealand, we have moved from a full lockdown to level 3. So still a lot of restrictions, but wherever you are watching, I hope you're well. You can see on screen that it says the webinar starts at 1:30 Indian Standard Time. The reason for that is I know a lot of you are watching in India, so wherever you are, I hope you're safe. As it says, today is going to be a listening focus. The last webinar was also based upon listening, and we looked at section 1 of a practice test from the GRAID website. Today we're going to go through section 2 of that test. If this is the first time you're watching a webinar, or this webinar in particular, my name is Greg. I've been an English teacher for the last 15 or so years. Most of that time I spent in South Korea, and a couple of years ago I came back here to my hometown in New Zealand. So since that time I've been focusing a lot on IELTS in particular, especially with the GRAID website. So what can you do at home? Well, you can follow along and watch me as I go through the listening test. I'm not going to play the whole listening test all at once. I'm going to break it down and explain the answers that I arrive at. So essentially, well, basically, you will be watching me do the practice listening test. As I do the listening test, you can please ask questions. You can do so on the GRAID Facebook page. We had some wonderful questions last time, so I'm looking forward to receiving some more questions this time as well. Let's go through to the GRAID site. Okay, so what you should be able to see now, I hope, is, make sure I've done that properly. Okay, hopefully what you can see at home, and let me know if it's not correct, hopefully what you can see is the GRAID dashboard. So as I move down to the bottom, you can see all the different practice modules. There's one for writing, reading. So the reading we've also used during the webinars. And as I scroll down to the bottom, we can see listening. So I'm going to click on the test. And we're going to continue with the same test that I did last time. Last time we did section 1, which was a dialogue. Today we're going to do section 2. Hopefully you can see my little cursor, and I'm highlighting that the topic is skydiving, right? So basically section 2 is a monologue, which means you're going to hear one person talking. Sometimes you might hear the occasional other voice, but basically section 2, it's one person doing 99% of the talking. So as I did last time, we're going to take a look at the questions and we're going to make some predictions. So predictions are really the key to doing well in the IELTS listening test or any listening test. And I'm going to try and explain or show you how to make predictions. Make this a little bigger for you. Okay. So we have a very common question type. This is question 11, the first question of section 2. We already know that the topic is skydiving, but we're asked to complete the sentence using no more than 3 words. So 1 word would be okay, 2 words would be okay, 3 words is okay, but not 4, right? It's really important. Now, again, when we look at the instructions, it doesn't say anything about using the words from the listening track. In most cases, you're going to be completing the answers, dictating the words exactly as they're given. But in some cases, you may be able to transform the grammar. So your answer must be grammatically correct. So if you think you have to transform the grammar or change the words from what you hear, then you can go ahead and do that. So there is only one skydiving death every. Now, what I mean by a prediction is using all of the information we have available to try and make a guess, right? A prediction is essentially a guess. So we have the word every. Now, hopefully you can also identify that that should be followed with a time phrase, right? So there is only one skydiving death every year, perhaps every 2 years. It might not also be a time phrase. It could also be every so ever or however many jumps, right? So however many skydiving jumps. Those are the kind of predictions that I would make. You don't have a lot of time to do this in the test, but when we're practicing, we need to think really carefully about all the possible answers. And just by practicing this, hopefully, it's going to make it easier for you on test day. So let's make a prediction for number 12. Now, again, same question type. We're filling in the blank with no more than 3 words. So you are more likely to die while, right? So when we have while, it's going to be followed by an action, right? So while you are doing something, right? So you are more likely to die while blank than die while skydiving. So again, the prediction here is going to be, well, it's going to be using the grammar, as I just said. We're looking at an action, but you can also engage your general knowledge. So what kinds of activities do you think are more dangerous than skydiving? That will be your prediction, right? So hopefully you're also making predictions at home as well. Question 13. So the temperature today is, right? And the whole time we're also trying to guess who the speaker is. We already know that this is about skydiving. So now hopefully we have an idea. Perhaps the speaker is going to be an instructor. It sounds like these are the kind of comments that the instructor might give people who are about to go skydiving. So the temperature, well, here I'm going to hear numbers, right? I know the instructions do say no more than 3 words, but I think it's still possible to list numbers. In some IELTS tests, I have seen specifically no more than 3 words and or numbers, but I think here it's possible to use numbers as well, because temperatures are usually given in numbers. Well, if you're giving a scientific temperature, it'll use numbers. Possibly degrees, possibly Fahrenheit, right? So depending on whether you're using imperial or metric. Question 14. The jumpsuit keeps skydivers warm at, right? So again, we're using the grammar to help us make predictions. So we can think here, well, skydivers need to keep warm. So where do they need to stay warm? At, right? So not in, so it's not in the sky, it's at, right? So when I think of at, I think of different levels, right? Or different altitudes, right? So again, I'm just using my general knowledge to think about skydiving. No, I haven't been skydiving myself. I'm too scared to do that. But I do know that the word altitude is usually associated with skydiving. If you're not sure what that word is, altitude means the height in the sky, basically. Okay, question 15, and we're going to predict the first 5 questions. As was the case with section 1, this section is broken up into 2 parts, and I can tell you that the first part relates to questions 1 to 15, and you can also guess that because when I scroll down and show you question 16, the question type changes. So that's usually an indication of where the sections are broken up. So question 15, when worn, the helmet must be, right? Now, again, using the grammar, must be, right? So what follows the modal must and the base verb be, right? So it could be an adjective. I think that is a most likely answer, right? So adjective, what are some adjectives to describe how you wear a helmet, right? So again, when we make predictions, they're just guesses, but they're guided by the grammar and the information in the partial sentences. So at this point, let's go back to question 11, and I'm going to play the audio for you. Right, so when you do this at home, you'll see the audio button up here. I'm playing mine on the side just to make it easier for you. I'll make sure the volume's nice and high so you can hear it clearly. And as I said at the beginning, I'm going to stop and explain as we find the answers, right? I'm a cheat. I have the script with me as well, so I might repeat parts of the script. If there are parts that you don't understand, please send me a message on Facebook. I can see them on my phone. So if you see me looking down to the side, that is probably me checking for messages. So let's commence.
Section 2. You will hear an instructor giving instructions about skydiving. Okay,
just as with section 1, we have the narrator telling us what's happening throughout the test. We have just been told, and we can probably guess this from the questions, that we are indeed going to hear an instructor telling us about skydiving.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15.
And again, as was the case with section 1, we do have a little bit of time in the actual test to read the questions. That time is so precious. And if you did watch the first webinar for listening, which was on Tuesday, I also suggested straight after you finish section 1, you should start reading ahead, right? So in the actual test, if you were to use the time at the end of section 1, you could have up to a minute or more to read the questions and make some mental notes, some predictions on your question paper. And just to tell you again, all of the information you write down on your question paper, you have an additional 10 minutes at the end of the test to transfer your answers to that answer paper, the answer sheet, right? So that means you can write quickly, you can check your spelling at the end of the test during those 10 minutes.
As you listen to the first part of the talk, answer questions 11 to 15.
Yep, and as I told you before, the first part of this section relates to questions 11 to 15, which are the no more than 3 words, fill in the gap questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know you're all very excited to go skydiving soon, but there are some important things that I need to go over before we get ready and head to the plane. Okay, first, I want to put your mind at ease and tell you that skydiving is very safe.
Okay, so we're listening to the instructor. In this case, the instructor has an American accent, right? So last time I told you that in the IELTS test, you may hear, well, you will hear speakers from different parts of the world. The most common ones that I have come across are British, American, as is the case here. The narrator has an Australian accent, but quite often you'll hear the speakers or the voice actors with Australian accents. And even sometimes you might hear my accent, which is a New Zealand accent. So those are the main 4 that you're likely to come across on the actual test. Now, we just heard the instructor with the American accent tell us that skydiving is very safe. So again, these are the kind of cues or the hints that we need to listen out for, which tell us, hopefully, that the answer to question 11 is coming up soon, right? So you really have to listen intently, have your pencil ready to scribble down the answer. You may want to do that at home, but I'm going to write the answers for you.
The statistic that I heard is that there is only 1 death every 100,000 jumps.
Okay, hopefully you heard that. And it is a number followed by a word. So there is only 1 skydiving death every 100,000 jumps. That is the first answer. So some of these questions are easier than others. I would suggest that that is an easier question because so much of the actual written information is given in the listening track, right? So The harder ones are where you have to paraphrase, or where the words on the question paper are paraphrased more. That's my opinion as to what makes a more challenging question. So let's keep listening. We're going to go on to question 12. Now, again, the prediction here was, well, my prediction was that this is probably going to be an activity, right? Because we're comparing activities. Well, I think that's what the answer will be.
And please don't worry, because that's never happened here. In fact, I'm glad that you chose to come here today rather than go fishing.
Okay, so we just heard something which may be the answer, right? So I'll repeat back slowly in case you have difficulty understanding the instructor. The instructor just said, in fact, I'm glad that you chose to come here today rather than go fishing, right? So maybe this is the answer, right? So there is that prediction. I predicted that it could be an activity. So perhaps the answer could be, you are more likely to die while fishing than die while skydiving. So let's check. Hopefully we're going to get some confirmation of that in a second.
Because you're far more likely to get swept off a rock and drown than die doing this.
Okay, so as the speaker just told us, the instructor said that you're more likely to be swept off a rock, right? So this is actually a fact. I heard that recreational fishing is the most dangerous pastime, basically, because so many people go fishing, especially in New Zealand, and they go fishing by the ocean. A big wave comes along and they get swept away. So the answer is indeed fishing. Kind of morbid topic today, right? Like talking about death to begin with, but hopefully the content is... We're listening for the temperature. Again, my prediction is that it's going to be a number, right? So usually temperatures are given using numbers. Yes, I know that you could say the temperature is hot, but usually when we state the temperature, we give a number. I used two words before, Celsius, which is the metric form, and then Fahrenheit, which is a very hot day in Fahrenheit. In New Zealand, we use Celsius. So sometimes in my hometown here, we get temperatures of 30, which, you know, is a warm day, a hot day. Let's see what the temperature is.
But there are some really important things to understand and remember at all times. The first thing is your clothing that you're...
Okay, so we've heard the instructor talk about clothing. Again, these are the little cues or the little hints that we need to listen out for, because when I hear somebody talking about clothing, that could be related to temperature, right? So let's listen on.
Going to wear. I know it's 33 degrees on the ground today.
Okay, just to repeat, I know it's 33 degrees on the ground today. That's the temperature using, well, I guess it's Celsius. So 33 degrees, a hot day. Let's listen to the rest.
But it's going to be freezing up there in the air.
Okay, so that really confirms that that is the answer. The temperature is 33 degrees. And this is where we're taking out part of what he said in that sentence. His entire sentence was, I know it's 33 degrees on the ground today, but it's going to be freezing up there in the air, right? So that's where sometimes you need to extract part of a whole sentence, right? Okay, let's move on to 14. Okay, so again, we should know from listening that perhaps the answer is going to be very close by in the listening track, because he's already spoken about clothing, and a jumpsuit is an item of clothing, right? So the jumpsuit keeps skydivers warm at. Now, I suggested it could have something to do with altitudes, which means the height that you're at in the sky. Let's check.
We're going to fit you all out in a jumpsuit.
Okay, so we hear the word jumpsuit, right? So you have to really prick your ears up and listen carefully, because hopefully the answer is following.
Which will keep you warm at high altitudes.
Okay, and as I guessed, we did hear the word altitudes. So you have to make sure that it's plural, right? So he did use the plural form, and that would be the best, most natural way to explain this sentence. The jumpsuit keeps skydivers warm at high altitudes, right? So I'll repeat the whole sentence that he said. We're going to fit you all out in a jumpsuit which keeps you warm at high altitudes, right? So again, if we were to think back a little bit before, we heard him talk about clothing, and that really made us listen carefully. And we knew that the answer was coming up, and it was the same as the prediction, altitudes. Okay, last one for this part of the listening track. And hopefully here, the key word we're going to hear is helmet. I can't really think of too many other ways of saying the word helmet, so I'm pretty sure we're going to hear this in the listening.
It's also made of a strong fabric which will help prevent any scratches when you land. So when you put it on, please check for any holes or tears.
Okay, so at this point, he's still speaking about the jumpsuit. So we're still listening, right? You'll have this happen sometimes. There'll be some patches in the listening track where you just have to listen. Sometimes you might get a couple of questions which are quite close to each other. And then at other times, you'll just have to keep listening, waiting for that keyword. Hopefully we're going to hear it, and it's helmet in this case.
I know you're going to be a little hot in them down here on the ground, but you will be thanking me when you jump. The next thing you're going to be fitted with is your helmet.
Okay, so here it is. We hear the word helmet. So again, our ears prick up, right? That means we listen really carefully.
When you put it on, make sure it fits tightly.
Okay, now this is a difficult one. I'm going to repeat carefully what he said. When you put it on, it is the helmet. Make sure it fits tightly, right? So he's used the adverb form, but that would not be the correct answer grammatically. We need to change the adverb form to the adjective. So we did predict that it was going to be an adjective. So I'm going to write down what I heard. Now, some students may do this. When worn, the helmet must be tightly. That is grammatically incorrect. We need to change the adverb form to the adjective form. So that is an example where occasionally you have to transform the grammar to have the correct answer on your question paper. When worn, the helmet must be adjective tight, right? So we're going to continue on, and this means we're going to hear the last part of this part of the section, and it's going to be followed by a little break. So
I know it may feel a little uncomfortable, but you will be traveling at some really high speeds when you jump, so it cannot be loose. You must wear your helmet at all times. If you take it off, the instructor will not let you jump.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20.
Okay, so like I said, I can't think of a section that I've heard that doesn't have a break, but you'll hear the narrator tell us that you have some more time to read ahead and look at the remaining questions for this section. Now, in this case, the questions are multiple choice, right? The good news is, and again, I have not come across an IELTS test which does not follow this pattern, but the questions always follow the sequence of the listening track, right? So I think it would be a very, very difficult test if the questions were out of order with the listening track itself. So multiple choice, I think, are harder ones, in my opinion, because you just have to scan so much more, right? So as I said last time, this is not really a true listening test because you're also having to engage your reading skills. So thinking about it as an examiner though, it's really hard to purely test pure listening skills. Obviously, so many tests have to have a written form to accompany the listening itself. So that's what I mean. It makes it more difficult when you have multiple choice questions because you just have a lot more to read while you're listening, right? So these may be harder for you. And if that's the case, well, they're going to be harder for everybody, I think. So let's have a prediction though. Which statement is not true? Now, this is where you have to read the instructions so carefully. Here we're told in capitals not, right? So one of these statements is not true about the listening that we're going to hear. They make customers wear goggles, right? So they don't make their customers wear goggles. And Easy Dive equips their customers with special goggles. Now, this is where, if you know anything about skydiving, just think about it, right? So B seems very unlikely, right? When you go skydiving, or when you think about skydiving, you look at pictures of people going skydiving. Maybe some of you have been skydiving. I always guess that people wear goggles. So B seems unlikely. So to me, it seems A and C are the most likely answers. That's probably as much as we can do at this stage with our prediction for 16. 17, what kind of altimeter? Now, this may be a new word. So if you do come across a new word and you're not sure what it is, you're just going to have to guess. Now, before we did encounter the word altitude, right? So I explained that altitudes relate to different heights in the sky. So if you're not sure what this word means, think about the word altitude, and meter measures things. So maybe an altimeter measures height in the sky. So what kind of altimeter does Easy Dive equip their customers with? Now, again, this is a really hard one to predict. I don't really know a lot about skydiving, so to me, all of these seem possible, right? So that is a harder one when it's really hard to predict. That makes it harder, I think. So to me, 17, I'm going to have to really listen carefully because I really can't make a good prediction there. Okay, we're given an initialism, AAD, right? So stand for means we have the initialism, AAD, and we have the whole phrase. Just like USA stands for United States of America, right? So we're given some different phrases: aeronautic activation device, automatic aerospace device, automatic activation device. Again, I think 18 is a harder question because it's quite hard to really think which one is the most likely answer. They all seem like they're possible, right? So that's where you are being tested, right? So some questions will be easier to predict. Here, we can't even use grammar to help us. So we're just going to have to listen really carefully. But what I can tell you is I think it's very likely that we're going to hear the initialism, AAD, right? So that'll make it easier. We can just keep our ears open when we hear AAD, get our pencils ready and listen to circle the best answer. Here's another one of these: which statement is not true, or what statement is not true about AAD? And we're given a few different options. Again, these all look quite likely, but what I would be thinking here is I'm just going to listen really carefully for the initialism AAD, and that's when I'm just going to concentrate. Again, another question where it's really, we have no idea, right? How many of the customers have tried skydiving before? We have no ideas about the customers. We have no idea about the customers. So we do have some difficult questions which were hard to predict. If that's the case, then focus on keywords, right? So keyword for me in 20 will be customers, and maybe we're going to hear tried skydiving or been skydiving. So the prediction will shift from the answer to the kinds of words that we're going to hear. Hard to predict 19, so that keyword is AAD. And maybe calculate, but I would be focusing on AAD, as is the case with question 18. So let's go ahead and we'll listen to the rest of this listening track.
Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
The same goes for goggles. I know that some companies offer goggles as a choice to the...
Okay, now what he's just said is what's known as a red herring. It's something which may throw you off track, right? So I'm going to repeat what he said. He said, I know that some companies offer goggles as a choice, right? Now, he's not talking about EasyDive. He's talking about some other companies, right? So I know some students very quickly, they may have heard that and they may answer B. Oh, it's a choice. So they don't make their customers wear goggles. That's where it's so important to read the question. The instructor works for a company called EasyDive. You need to answer what is true about EasyDive. So that is, B is not the answer. Hopefully we're going to hear about EasyDive in a second.
Their customers, but here at EasyDive, they are compulsory.
Okay, so here we need to process the meaning of the word compulsory. If you're not sure what compulsory means, I will tell you. Compulsory means that you have no choice, right? So that means that the answer is A. Yep, so I just click on A because at EasyDive, it is compulsory to wear goggles. We carry on to 17. And again, the key word here I'm going to be listening for is altimeter.
First of all, we don't want your eyes to get damaged. And second, we know you will enjoy the view better with goggles. We will supply you with special goggles so your view won't be inhibited at all. In fact, you will have a better view with goggles as your eyes won't dry out.
Okay, so
another important piece of equipment.
I nearly missed that as well, right? So you don't want to switch off because we're told right at the end that EasyDive equips their customers with, I'll just check that. Okay, yes, it should be special goggles, right? So I'm going to get rid of, I'm so sorry, I have confused you. What we need to do, which statement is not true about EasyDive, right? So please accept my apology. So yes, the answer is actually B, because the statement says which statement is not true about EasyDive. So just to review, EasyDive do make customers wear goggles, and EasyDive also equips customers with special goggles. So in fact, that means that the answer is B, right? So this is not true, right? Remember, at EasyDive, it's compulsory, right? So this has the opposite meaning. B has the opposite meaning from compulsory. So that is indeed true. I nearly confused myself, right? So the answer is most definitely B, because that is not true about EasyDive. Shows you again how important it is to just double check the questions, doesn't it? So we're going to go on to 17. And it's just a direct question. What kind of altimeter does EasyDive equip their customers with, right? So here the keyword is going to be altimeter. Hopefully we're going to hear that soon.
Is the altimeter. As the name suggests.
Okay, so he's pronounced it in a different way that I did, altimeter. With English, there are variations in pronunciation. If I pronounced it wrong, perhaps I did, but yeah, different Englishes. So we have US English, we have New Zealand English. There are alternative pronunciations throughout the English-speaking world. He's pronounced it altimeter. Right?
Suggests it measures altitude, which is your view with goggles, as your eyes won't dry out.
I'm just going to go back a bit so that we can hear from the beginning, so we can hear that keyword, altimeter or altimeter, as he said.
Another important piece of equipment is the altimeter. As the name suggests, it measures altitude, which is your height above sea level.
Okay, so here we're told that altitude measures height above sea level, a little bit of information extra, but what we need to know is the answers for 17. So we're looking, this is where I think it is difficult. You need to scan and listen at the same time.
Some altimeters are worn on the wrist.
Okay, so here we have it. Some altimeters are worn on the wrist, right? So let's check to make sure there's no additional information, because as we talked about last time, there can be corrections, right? So the speaker can tell us something that we think is the answer, and then we can get different information. So we listen to the whole thing.
Or some on the torso, but the altimeter we supply you with is an audio altimeter, so you can hear the altitude inside your helmet.
Okay, that's a fine example of where we're given some information and then the speaker basically tells us different information straight away. I'm going to repeat what he said because that's quite hard to process. So some altimeters are worn on the wrist or some on the torso, but, so that is a really important word, but, right? This means there's a contrast. At Easy Dive, there's something different. But the altimeter we supply you with, we being Easy Dive, right? So this is a harder one where we're having to comprehend a lot. The altimeter we supply you with is an audio altimeter, right? So there's our answer, right? So last time when we did listening, we had some self-corrections. We had corrections in the dialogue. It really is a true test of listening comprehension. Not always the first thing we hear is the final answer. Let's move on to 18. All right, so we're listening for the keyword AAD, right? Hopefully we're going to hear that.
But let's go on to the most important equipment, your AAD and parachute. The AAD, or automatic activation device.
Okay, now you would have heard the preposition or conjunction, sorry, or, right? Or is used to give a meaning, right? So what he said is the AAD, so we did hear that initialism, the AAD or automatic activation device, right? So the use of or is, it's also used to give the meaning of a word, right? Or to give the full phrase for an initialism. So the AAD or automatic activation device, right? So we're looking at C. So here we're going to keep listening because there's also another not true statement about AAD, right? So I'm not going to make the same mistake I did above. One of these is not true about AAD.
Which calculates your height above sea level and will automatically deploy your parachute.
Okay, so we heard two things. Again, this is the hardest question in my opinion, because there's a lot of information that we're listening to, and we have a lot of things to scan at the same time. So I'll repeat back what he said. So it calculates, well, he said, which the AAD or automatic activation device, which calculates your height above sea level, right? So that is true, right? So the answer is not A because A is true. And it will automatically deploy your parachute, right? So we're told two things. Right, so we're told two things really in a short space of time. So that's a hard one. Again, I'll repeat it for you because I think this is the hardest question. The AAD or automatic activation device, which calculates your height above sea level and will automatically deploy your parachute. So that means it's not C, right? So C is not true about the AAD, right? Because A and B are true. We heard the listener tell us that the AAD calculates your height above sea level and it's used to deploy your parachute. So the last one, hopefully this is an easier one for most of you because it's a quite simple everyday question. How many of the customers have tried skydiving, right? So how many question. So it's either none, two, or one. None, one, or two.
This will be calibrated for you before you leave. Now, without your parachute, skydiving simply won't be possible. Again, your parachute and harness has been checked many times, but you will be equipped with a hook knife should you need to cut open your parachute canopy during your jump. Well, I know this will be the first jump for all but 2 of you.
Okay, here we have it. Well, I know this will be the first jump for all but 2 of you, right? So that means 2 people have tried skydiving before, right? So of all the customers that the instructor is speaking to, 2 of them have tried skydiving before. Again, we have to really listen carefully and process what we hear. So he said, well, I know this will be the first jump for all but 2 of you, right? So every other customer, they have not tried skydiving, but 2 of them have, right? So rather nervously, again, this is the hard part for me. I want to make sure I got everything right. I'm going to go through to next, and that hopefully should record my answers. Yay, they're all green, which means they're all correct, right? So just make sure I play the rest of the tracks just as an experience for you.
You are all about to have one of the greatest experiences of your lives. It will all be filmed for you, so please enjoy.
That is the end of section 2.
Okay, so we're told by the narrator that's the end of the section. Now, just as a hint, and you don't always have to follow my hints, but if I were doing this test on test day, at this stage, I would go straight ahead to section 3 and I would start making predictions, right? Remember, you do get those 10 minutes at the end. So if you wanted to check your spelling, you can do that in those 10 minutes. In fact, I would say it's really not a good idea to start changing any of your answers because you only get to hear this once. If you start second guessing your answers, what I've seen happen in practice quite often is students will go back and review their answers that they've written down, and I'm not sure what they're hearing or what memories they're hearing, but sometimes I've seen students write down the correct answer and then at the end of the section, second guess themselves and go back and change their answer to an incorrect answer. So I think with listening, because you're only hearing it once, the only thing you can really check is the spelling. And obviously that means in the IELTS test, yes, you do have to have the correct spelling. So if you think about it, the IELTS listening test is mainly a test of listening, but you're also tested on your reading because you have to read the questions and spelling. So it's one of the more difficult parts on the IELTS test. Obviously the 4 tests are speaking, writing, reading and listening, but I know for a lot of students, the listening is a hard one. So in saying that, I hope that these webinars are helping. I'm going to write up the rest of the schedule here so we can see what's coming up. Okay, so today's one was the Thursday webinar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the schedule. So we have webinars Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. Right, so it's always at the same time, 1:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time, which here in New Zealand is 8 p.m. So what will happen is on Sunday coming up, first Sunday in May, right? So what's that, May the 3rd, I believe. This Sunday coming up, we're going to look at section 3 of the same listening test. And then next Tuesday, we'll finish this practice listening test with section 4. So the listening tests always have 4 sections. Today we did section 2, which is the monologue. Sunday, we're going to do section 3. And then next Tuesday, we'll finish it with section 4. So then I'll tell you ahead of time what's going to be the plan for the next Thursday. So stay safe. Just check again. Doesn't look like we had any questions today. So hopefully that means that everything was easy enough for you to follow at home. But if you do want to ask a question, please pop a question onto the Facebook page, the GRAID Facebook page, and hopefully it'll be answered for you. take care, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday, 1:30 Indian Standard Time, which is 8 p.m. here in New Zealand.